Hyunwoo Kim sat in his usual chair at the Galactic Council chambers. The massive room stretched out before him like a metal cave filled with strange voices and stranger smells. After 47 years of coming to this place, he knew every crack in the walls and every sound the alien delegates made when they were angry. Today felt different, though. Today felt like an ending. So-Min Park, his aide, placed a datapad in front of him. On the screen was their latest proposal. A simple request to send food and medicine to 3 war-torn star systems. The people there were dying. Children were starving. It was basic human decency to help them. The human delegation presents proposal HC7749, So-Min announced to the chamber. Her voice was clear and professional, even though Hyunwoo could see the tension in her shoulders. The Vorthak representative, Keltharis, didn't even look up from his own device. His black tentacles moved across the controls while he spoke in his cold, mechanical voice. Another emotional waste of resources. The humans want us to throw money at failed colonies again. Several other delegates made sounds of agreement. The Thexrians clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The Zalati's biolights pulsed in synchronized patterns that meant they found something amusing. Council Speaker Mortax raised his long, scaled hand for silence. His reptilian features showed no emotion as he spoke. The Vorthak position has merit. These systems have proven they cannot govern themselves effectively. Why should the Council waste valuable resources on inevitable failures? Hyunwoo felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had heard these same words countless times before. Every time humans tried to help someone, to save lives, to do what was right, the Council shot them down. Always the same reasons, always the same cold logic that put money before lives. With respect, Speaker, Hyunwoo said, standing slowly. His old bones creaked from sitting too long. These are not failed colonies. These are people whose worlds were destroyed by wars that the Council authorized. Wars that were economically necessary, Keltharis interrupted. The Terran delegation continues to think with their hearts instead of their minds. This is why humans will never truly understand galactic politics. The chamber filled with more clicking and pulsing, and the harsh breathing sounds that passed for agreement among the assembled aliens. Hyunwoo looked around at all these creatures he had worked with for nearly 5 decades. He had tried to understand them, to find common ground, to build something better together, but they had never tried to understand humans. We formally request a recess, Hyunwoo announced. Speaker Mortax looked surprised. Humans never called for breaks during debates. They usually just sat there and took whatever insults were thrown at them, then tried again with the next proposal. Very well, 1 hour recess. Hyunwoo and So-Min walked to the human delegation's private chamber. The room was small and plain, compared to the elaborate spaces other species demanded. Humans had always been practical about such things. So-Min activated the quantum communication array. Within seconds, the face of Ji-Hai Lee appeared on the screen. She was back on Earth, serving as Secretary of Interstellar Affairs. Her expression was grim. I watched the debate, Ji-Hai said without any greeting. The vote was unanimous, Hyunwoo. All 197 nations agreed. The Terran Assembly is done with this charade. Hyunwoo nodded. He had expected this day would come eventually. Earth had been patient for a long time, maybe too patient. But even human patience had limits. The withdrawal documents? He asked. Already prepared and authenticated. You have full authority to present them immediately. So-Min pulled up files on her datapad. Orders for all human military forces to return to Earth. Instructions for human businesses to cancel their contracts with alien partners. Procedures for evacuating human civilians from Council space. It was all very organized and efficient. Very human, sir, So-Min said quietly. Are we really doing this? After all these years? Hyunwoo looked at the young woman. She had joined the diplomatic corps believing she could make a difference. She had watched proposal after proposal get rejected, while alien species suffered and died. She had seen human generosity treated as weakness and human compassion mocked as stupidity. Yes, he said, we're really doing this. The hour passed quickly. When they returned to the chamber, something had changed in Hyunwoo's posture. So-Min noticed it first, the way he carried himself like a man who had finally made a difficult decision. The session is resumed, Speaker Mortax announced. We were discussing the human proposal HC7749. Hyunwoo remained standing. So-Min stood beside him, datapad in hand. Honored delegates, Hyunwoo began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Humanity withdraws proposal HC7749. There were sounds of satisfaction from various alien throats. Another human bleeding heart proposal defeated. Furthermore, Hyunwoo continued, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber went completely silent. Even the constant background hum of the life support system seemed to stop. You cannot simply leave, Speaker Mortak said, his scales changing color with agitation. The trade agreements, the defense pacts, the shared infrastructure projects are hereby terminated, Somin said, reading from her datapad. All human military assets will withdraw from Council space within 30 standard days. All trade relationships are suspended. All aid programs are cancelled. The Thexrian delegate started making high-pitched shrieking sounds. The Zalati's lights flashed rapidly in patterns that hurt to look at. Even the usually calm Vorthak showed signs of distress, their tentacles writhing. This is impossible, Keltaris said. The humans provide 40% of the Council's technical support. They maintain the quantum relay network. They operate most of the medical facilities. They cannot simply abandon their responsibilities. Yunwoo smiled for the first time in months. It was not a pleasant smile. You have repeatedly told us that emotions have no place in galactic politics. You have taught us that only cold logic matters. We have learned that lesson very well. He picked up his datapad and walked toward the exit. So-Min followed, her steps echoing in the now silent chamber. Consider this humanity's most logical decision, Yunwoo called back without turning around. We choose to stop wasting our time and resources on people who do not want our help. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. In the chamber, hundreds of alien delegates sat in shocked silence, finally beginning to understand what they had just lost. Admiral Tae-Jin Cho was eating breakfast in his quarters aboard the UES Seoul when the priority message arrived. The quantum burst transmission made his coffee cup rattle on the metal table. He opened the message and read it twice before the words sank in. Operation Exodus.
Bring our people home. Tae-Jin had been expecting this order for months.
The signs had been there for anyone who cared to look. Human proposals rejected one after another. Alien delegates treating human concerns like jokes. The growing frustration in communications from Earth. Still, seeing it written out in official military language made his stomach clench. Humanity was really leaving. He activated his ship's communication system and sent coded messages to every human vessel in the sector. Military ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, research vessels. They all needed to know. All human ships prepare for immediate withdrawal from Council space. Detailed orders to follow. Meanwhile, back in the Council chambers, chaos was spreading like fire through dry grass. Speaker Mortax tried to maintain order, but his usual authority seemed to have vanished along with the human delegation. Without human peacekeeping forces to back up Council decisions, the other species were already eyeing each other with suspicion. We must void this withdrawal immediately, the Thexrian delegate shrieked, her insect-like voice rising to painful frequencies. The humans cannot be allowed to simply abandon their commitments. On what authority? Asked Keltharis, his Vorthak coldness now tinged with something that might have been worry. They have broken no laws. The Council Charter allows voluntary withdrawal. But the infrastructure, protested the Zalati representative, his biolights flashing rapidly. Human engineers built half the stations in this sector. Human technicians maintain our communication networks. Human doctors run our hospitals. The chamber erupted in arguments. Species that had spent decades taking human services for granted suddenly realized how much they depended on those services. On Earth, news of the withdrawal spread quickly. President Wu Jin-song called an emergency meeting of the Terran Assembly. Representatives from every nation gathered in the Great Hall in Geneva, their faces showing mixtures of excitement and nervousness. The die is cast, President Song announced. As of today, humanity charts its own course among the stars. In the human quarter of Nexus Station, the Council's great commercial hub, word spread through the community like electricity. Dr. Sujin Han was treating patients in the main hospital when her assistant brought her the news. We're really leaving? Asked the young nurse, a woman named Gayun, whose family had lived on the station for 3 generations. Pack everything important, Dr. Sujin said calmly. We have 30 days. The alien patients in the hospital beds looked at each other nervously. Most of them had never been treated by non-human doctors. Human medicine was simply better, more advanced, more careful about keeping patients alive rather than just curing diseases. In the station's commercial district, Min Ho-yoon was closing down his shipping company's local office. His alien business partners crowded around his desk, offering increasingly desperate deals. "We can double your profit margins," pleaded a Thexian trader whose carapace was clicking nervously. "Triple them. Just maintain the shipping routes to the outer colonies." Minho shook his head politely. "All contracts are void. If you want to negotiate new terms, you'll need to deal with Earth directly." He didn't mention that Earth had already decided not to deal with any species that had consistently voted against human proposals in the Council. Captain Young Soo, Chang commanded the human security force that kept order in Nexus Station's rough sections. His officers were already packing their equipment when the station's alien administrator arrived. "You cannot leave now," the administrator said, his translator struggling with his species' complex grammar. "The Vorthak trading mission is arriving next week. There are already tensions with the Zalati merchants. Without human peacekeepers, not our problem anymore," Young-soo replied, sealing another box of equipment. "You've got 30 days to find someone else to keep your people from killing each other." Back on Earth, engineer Bo-ram Choi was receiving frantic calls from the agricultural worlds she had helped develop. The atmospheric processors that kept alien colonies breathing were all built with human technology. More importantly, they all required regular maintenance that only human engineers knew how to perform. "Dr. Choi, please." The Zalati colonial governor's voice came through the quantum link. "Without the processors, our colony will die within 6 months. We have families, children." Bo-ram felt a familiar pain in her chest, the same pain she felt every time the Council rejected aid to dying worlds. The same pain she felt when alien delegates laughed at human compassion. "You should have thought about that before voting against our refugee aid proposals," she said quietly, and cut the connection. The hegemony of Keth sent urgent messages to their human military advisors. Their fleets were designed around human tactical doctrine. Their officers were trained in human military academies. Their weapon systems used human targeting software. Colonel Do-hyun Park was supervising the evacuation of human personnel from Keth Prime when the hegemony's war minister arrived. "Colonel, surely we can reach some accommodation," the alien said, his translator converting his electromagnetic pulses into words. "Your people have been our allies for generations." "Your government voted against every humanitarian proposal we made," Do-hyun replied. "You called us weak for wanting to protect civilian populations. You said emotion had no place in warfare." The war minister's energy field flickered with distress. "But we need your strategic expertise. The Vorthak are moving fleets toward our border worlds. Then you'd better start learning strategy quickly." All across Council space, similar scenes played out. Human doctors shutting down hospitals, human engineers deactivating power plants, human teachers leaving schools, human peacekeepers returning to their ships. The aliens watched in growing horror as the people they had taken for granted simply walked away. Speaker Mortax called another emergency session, but only half the delegates showed up. The others were too busy trying to contact Earth directly, hoping to negotiate separate deals. "This is a disaster," the speaker said to the nearly empty chamber. "The humans provided essential services across 17 sectors. Trade routes will collapse. Colonial worlds will become uninhabitable. Border conflicts will resume without human mediation." Kelthara sat silent at the Vorthak table. His species prided themselves on logic and calculation. Now he was calculating what his empire would look like without human support. And the numbers were frightening. The Vorthak had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had relied on human peacekeeping forces to maintain order. They had built trading networks but used human shipping companies to move goods. They had established colonies, but needed human technology to keep them running. For the first time in his long life, Keltaris wondered if the Vorthak had made a serious mistake. In his quarters aboard the Soul, Admiral Taejin Cho looked out at the stars through his viewport. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting. Humanity was going home, but not in defeat. They were going home to build something better. 24 hours after the withdrawal announcement, cracks began appearing in the galactic economy like stress fractures in metal under too much pressure. Yoonji Kang sat in her office in Seoul, watching her communication board light up with incoming calls. As trade minister for the Terran Cooperative, she had expected this. What she hadn't expected was how desperate the aliens would sound. Minister Kang, the Thexrian trade representative's voice buzzed through her speakers. We must discuss the medical supply contracts immediately. Our silicon-based population requires specific enzyme treatments that only human laboratories produce. Yunji looked at her notes. The Thexrians had voted against human proposals 47 times in the past 5 years. They had publicly called human medical ethics primitive and inefficient. All contracts are terminated, she said simply. If the Thexrian Republic wishes to purchase medical supplies, they may submit a formal request through standard diplomatic channels. But our people will die without those treatments. Perhaps you should have considered that before calling our medical ethics primitive. She ended the call and immediately received another one. On Kepler 442b, engineer Boram Choi was methodically shutting down the atmospheric processing stations that kept 3 Zalati colonies alive. Her alien counterparts watched in growing panic as she powered down system after system. Dr. Choi, the colonial administrator's biolights flickered in distress patterns. You cannot simply abandon these installations. We do not know how to maintain them. Boram paused in her work. You had 50 years to learn. Your engineers were invited to training programs every year. Your government always refused, saying human technology was unnecessarily complex for Zalati needs. But we trusted you to maintain them forever. That was your mistake. The atmospheric processors would continue running for about 6 months before they needed major maintenance. After that, the Zalati colonies would slowly become uninhabitable. Boram felt sorry for the civilians who would suffer, but their government had made its choices. Captain Youngsu Jang was loading the last of his security equipment onto human transports when the first fight broke out. A Vorthak trader accused a Thexrian merchant of selling diluted pharmaceuticals. Without human peacekeepers to separate them, the argument quickly turned violent. The station's alien security forces tried to intervene, but they had always relied on human backup for serious conflicts. Within an hour, 3 different species were involved in what was quickly becoming a riot. Youngsu, watched from his transport's viewport as Nexus Station's main commercial district filled with smoke and flashing weapons fire. Part of him wanted to help, to restore order like he had done thousands of times before. Instead, he ordered his ship to depart. Dr. Sujin Han was among the last humans to leave Nexus Station's hospital. She had spent the final days training alien doctors in emergency procedures, knowing they would need every advantage they could get. Doctor, a young Zalati medical student caught her arm as she prepared to board her transport. How do we treat Thexrian silicon poisoning? You never taught us that procedure. Because your government refused to approve cross-species medical training, Sujin replied sadly. They said it was too dangerous for Zalati to learn about other species' biology. The student's lights flickered with despair. But if we cannot treat other species, how will we maintain the hospital? You won't. Sujin boarded her transport, leaving behind the most advanced medical facility in 3 sectors. Within days, alien patients would start dying from conditions that human doctors could have easily treated. Back on Earth, President Wu Jin-song was holding daily briefings on the withdrawal's progress. The reports painted a picture of rapidly spreading chaos. The hegemony of Keth is requesting immediate military assistance, reported Defense Secretary Chan Wu-li. Vorthak, raiders are attacking their border worlds. Response, the president asked. None. The hegemony voted against our Protection of Civilian Populations Treaty last year. The Aquatic Collective is offering exclusive mineral rights in exchange for continued shipping services. Added Trade Minister Yunji, they called our shipping regulations economically wasteful 6 months ago, the president noted. Declined, Admiral Taejin. Cho's fleet was halfway to Earth when they received a distress call from the mining world of Kepler 438c. Vorthak warships were demanding tribute from the mixed species colony, knowing there were no human peacekeepers to stop them. Admiral, his communications officer asked, should we respond? Taejin looked at the tactical display. His ships could easily drive off the Vorthak raiders. It would be a simple matter to protect the innocent colonists. Continue course for Earth, he ordered. His bridge crew looked surprised. Humans always responded to distress calls. It was practically a genetic instinct. Sir, there are civilians down there. Civilians whose governments consistently voted against human protection initiatives, Tae-jin said firmly. If they wanted our protection, they should have supported our proposals when it mattered. The distress calls continued for 3 more hours before going silent. On the industrial world of Gliese 66 the massive manufacturing complexes that produced everything from starship parts to medical equipment began shutting down. The factories were owned by human corporations, operated by human workers, and maintained by human engineers. Manager Dong-hyun Kim supervised the systematic dismantling of Assembly Line 7, which produced the quantum processors used in most alien communication systems. Sir, his Thexrian assistant clicked nervously. Without these processors, interstellar communication will become impossible in most sectors. Then the other species should have invested in their own technology, instead of relying on human innovation, Dong-hyun replied. Within hours, quantum relay stations across 3 spiral arms began failing as their processors burned out without replacement parts. The council called another emergency session, but communication problems meant only half the delegates could participate. Those who did manage to connect spent most of their time arguing about whose fault the crisis was. The humans are being emotional and vindictive, Keltharis declared, though his usual confidence seemed shaken. This withdrawal is clearly meant to punish the council for making logical decisions. Logical decisions? The Zalati representative's biolights flashed angrily. You called their humanitarian proposals wasteful sentiment, while building your empire on the backs of their peacekeeping forces. Speaker Mortax tried to maintain order, but his authority was crumbling along with everything else. Without human mediation, old disputes between species were resurfacing with new intensity. The Thexrian delegate began broadcasting on emergency frequencies. We formally request immediate humanitarian aid from the Terran government. Our medical crisis grows worse each day. Similar messages flooded Earth's communication networks. Pleas for help, offers of tribute, promises of better treatment if only humans would return. President Song reviewed the messages with his cabinet. Some were pitiful, others were angry. A few were threatening. Public opinion? He asked. 97% approval for the withdrawal, reported his chief of staff. Most people feel we wasted too much time and resources helping people who didn't appreciate it. The president nodded. For too long, humanity had been the galaxy's unpaid police force, firefighter, doctor, and engineer. They had poured their blood and treasure into maintaining a civilization that treated them like servants. Draft a response to all requests, he ordered. Earth is willing to discuss individual trade agreements with species that demonstrate genuine respect for human values. All other requests are denied. It was a polite way of saying that most of the galaxy could solve its own problems. 3 weeks into the withdrawal, the first colony fell. A Vorthax settlement in the Outer Rim lost its atmospheric processors and couldn't get replacement parts. 2,000 colonists died before evacuation ships arrived. The news spread quickly through the remaining functional communication networks. For the first time, alien species began to understand that this wasn't a negotiating tactic or an emotional outburst. Humanity was really leaving, and without them, the galaxy was a much more dangerous place. 3 weeks into humanity's withdrawal, the galactic economy wasn't just cracking anymore. It was falling apart like a building with its foundation removed. Trade Minister Yoon-ji Kang worked 16-hour days in her Seoul office, managing what she privately called the begging season. Her communication board never stopped, flashing with incoming calls from desperate alien governments. Minister Kang, the hegemony of Keth's economic advisor, spoke through his electromagnetic translator. We offer a 300% increase in rare mineral prices. Exclusive mining rights on 12 worlds. Anything you want. Yoonji looked at her files. The hegemony had been one of the worst offenders, voting against every human proposal for the past decade. They had publicly stated that human economic policies were inefficient and overly generous. The Terran Cooperative appreciates your offer, she said in her most diplomatic voice. However, we are not currently accepting new trade partnerships. But you must understand, the advisor's voice grew more urgent. Without human shipping companies, our economy will collapse within months. 60% of our interstellar trade depends on your cargo vessels. Perhaps you should have considered that before calling our trade regulations primitive. She ended the call. Immediately, another one came in from the Aquatic Collective. offering exclusive fishing rights in their protein-rich oceans. Then the Crystalline Republic, promising rare crystal formations. Then a dozen smaller species, each more desperate than the last. None of them offered what Earth really wanted to hear: genuine apologies and promises to treat human values with respect. On the frontier world of Kepler 186f, Colonial Administrator Hai Jin Moon was overseeing the evacuation of the last human settlement. The Thraxi governor begged her to reconsider, as human cargo shuttles loaded family belongings and personal effects. Your people provided 80% of our planetary defense grid. The governor's translator converted his rapid clicking into words. Without your orbital platforms, we are defenseless against raiders. Hai Jin paused in directing the loading crews. Governor, 6 months ago your government voted against our proposal to protect the Kari refugee camps. You said it was not economically viable to defend civilian populations. But that was different. Those were refugees, not established colonies. Those were children and families who had lost everything. Your government chose to let them die rather than spend money protecting them. The governor's mandibles clicked in distress. We made mistakes. Perhaps we could reconsider those policies. Too late for that now. Hai Jin boarded the last shuttle, leaving behind defensive installations that had protected the Thraxi system for 30 years. Within days, Vorthak raiders would strip the orbital platforms of anything valuable, leaving the planet vulnerable to attack. Chief Engineer Insu Lee was the last human to leave the great shipyards of Proxima Station. He carried a small device that would complete his final task, activating the quantum locks in every major system the humans had built. Engineer Lee? The station commander's voice echoed through the empty corridors. Surely we can reach some agreement. My people have worked alongside yours for generations. Insu stopped walking and turned to face the Zalati administrator. Commander, I trained your engineers for 20 years. I offered to teach them how to maintain these systems. Your government always refused, saying it was too expensive to train Zalati in human technology. We thought you would always be here. That was your mistake. Insu activated his device. Throughout Proxima Station, critical systems locked themselves with quantum encryption that would take alien computers centuries to break. The shipyards that had built vessels for half the galaxy went dark. Technical Supervisor Daeho Shin managed the quantum relay network that enabled faster-than-light communication across 3 spiral arms. From his control center on Nexus Station, he watched as relay after relay went offline. Supervisor, his Thexrian assistant's voice was barely controlled panic. The aliens cannot maintain the quantum buoys without our technical teams. Interstellar communication is failing across 17 sectors. Daeho nodded calmly. He had warned the Council about this exact scenario 5 years ago, when they voted down his proposal for technology-sharing agreements. They had called his concerns human paranoia about alien technical competence. Begin final shutdown sequence, he ordered. His assistant's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, this will leave billions of people unable to communicate with their families, their governments, their colonies. Then they should have voted differently. The quantum relay network that had connected the galaxy for over a century began its systematic shutdown. Soon, most alien species would be reduced to slower-than-light communication, making interstellar coordination nearly impossible. Back on Earth, President Wu Jin-song reviewed daily reports that read like accounts of a civilization in free fall. The Zalati-Thexrian border war has resumed, reported Defense Secretary Chan Wu. Without human peacekeepers, both sides are using unrestricted warfare. The Vorthak Empire is fragmenting, added Intelligence Director Mi-young Park. Conquered species are rebelling now that human forces aren't maintaining order. 17 colony worlds have declared independence from their parent governments, noted Foreign Minister Sungmin Cho. They're requesting direct diplomatic relations with Earth. The president studied the reports carefully. Some of the collapsing governments were genuinely surprised by the consequences of humanity's withdrawal. Others were angry, claiming humans had deliberately sabotaged galactic civilization. A few were threatening military action. Military assessment? He asked Admiral Tae Jin, who had returned to Earth with the withdrawal fleets. Sir, most alien military forces were designed around human tactical support and human-built equipment. Their actual independent capabilities are limited. Threats? Several species are making aggressive statements, but their fleets rely on human-maintained hyperdrives and human-designed weapon systems. None of them pose a credible threat to Earth. Dr. Kyungmi Ryu, Earth's chief economist, presented her analysis of humanity's post-withdrawal situation. The numbers were remarkable. Without the burden of supporting alien economies and infrastructure, Earth's economic output has increased by 40% in just 3 weeks. Our research and development programs are advancing at unprecedented rates. Colonial expansion? The president asked. We've identified 37 systems suitable for human settlement. Without council restrictions, we can establish colonies wherever we choose. Captain Nariseo, commander of the exploration vessel Busan Pioneer, had just discovered a pristine system in the Magellanic Cloud. For the first time in decades, humans could explore and expand without seeking alien permission or sharing resources with council members. Sir, she reported via quantum link, this system has 4 habitable worlds and abundant resources. No signs of alien presence or claims. It was freedom humanity hadn't known for generations. Speaker Mortax called yet another emergency council session, but less than half the delegates could attend. Communication failures, economic collapse, and military conflicts kept most species focused on their own survival. The human withdrawal has created a galactic crisis, the speaker announced to the nearly empty chamber. We must find a solution immediately. Keltharis sat alone at the Vorthak table. His empire was crumbling as conquered worlds rebelled and trade routes collapsed. For a species that prided itself on logical thinking, the Vorthak had made a remarkably stupid mistake. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should have listened to the humans. The few remaining delegates turned to stare at him. The Vorthak never admitted mistakes. They warned us this would happen, Keltharis continued. Every time we voted down their proposals, they told us the galaxy was becoming too dependent on human services. We called them emotional. We called them weak, he paused, his tentacles writhing with something that might have been regret. We forgot that sometimes the most logical action is to walk away from people who do not appreciate your efforts. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in council history, the aliens were beginning to understand what they had lost. But understanding came too late. Humanity was already building something new among the stars, something that didn't include the species that had treated them as servants and fools. The galaxy would learn to survive without human help, or it would fall apart trying. Either way, it was no longer humanity's problem. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, Hyunwoo Kim sat in his garden outside Seoul, tending to his roses. The morning sun felt warm on his face, and for the first time in decades, he felt truly peaceful. The quantum communicator on his wooden desk chimed constantly. Messages from alien governments, desperate pleas for negotiation, offers of tribute and trade deals. He had stopped reading them weeks ago. A particularly insistent chime made him look up from his flowers. Speaker Mortax's reptilian face appeared on the screen, looking haggard and desperate. The proud leader of the Galactic Council now looked like a man drowning in problems he couldn't solve. Ambassador Kim, Mortax began, his voice cracking slightly. Surely we can find some way to negotiate. The galaxy is falling apart without human involvement. Hyunwoo wiped dirt from his hands and looked at the screen calmly. You taught us that sentiment has no place in galactic politics, Speaker. You taught us that only cold logic matters. We learned that lesson very well. But the humanitarian crisis is not our concern. You made that clear every time you voted against our aid proposals. Hyunwoo reached over and closed the channel. The communicator immediately began chiming again with another call. He turned off the device entirely and returned to his roses. President Woo Jin-song was reviewing the 6-month reports in his office in Geneva. The numbers told a remarkable story of recovery and growth. Galactic situation? He asked his advisors. Catastrophic, replied Intelligence Director Mi-young Park. 47 governments have collapsed. The Vorthak Empire has lost 60% of its territory to rebellions. Interstellar trade has declined by 70%. Human casualties? 0, sir. All human personnel and civilians were evacuated successfully. Defense Secretary Chan Woo Lee added his report. Several alien species have made military threats against Earth, but none have the capability to follow through. Their fleets were too dependent on human technology and support. Economic status? Dr. Kyungmi Ryu smiled as she presented her data. Sir, this has been the most prosperous 6 months in human history. Without the burden of supporting alien economies and infrastructure, Earth's resources can focus entirely on human development and expansion. The president nodded. For too long, humanity had been the galaxy's unpaid caretakers, pouring their wealth and knowledge into maintaining a civilization that treated them like servants. Now Earth was discovering what they could accomplish when working for themselves alone. Captain Narration of the exploration vessel Busan Pioneer had just completed her survey of the Magellanic cloud systems. Her discovery reports painted pictures of worlds rich with resources and completely unclaimed by alien species. "Sir," she reported via quantum link, "we've identified over 100 systems suitable for human colonization. No alien presence, no territorial disputes, no council regulations to navigate. For the first time in generations, humanity could expand freely among the stars." On the former council world of Nexus Station, chaos had become the new normal. Without human peacekeepers, the different species fought constantly over resources and territory. The great trading hub that had once been the economic heart of 3 sectors was now a dangerous wasteland of gang warfare and black market dealings. Former Security Chief Young Soo, Jang watched the news reports from his new assignment on Luna Base. The station he had spent 15 years protecting was now a monument to what happened when cooperation broke down. "Any regrets?" asked his replacement, a young officer named Jin Ho who would never know the old galaxy. "None," Young Soo replied. "We gave them 50 years to learn how to work together. They chose to fight instead." The medical crisis was spreading across alien space like a plague. Dr. Sujin Han, now director of the new Human Medical Research Institute on Mars, received daily reports of preventable deaths in alien hospitals. "Doctor," her assistant asked, "the Zalati are requesting emergency medical aid. Their doctors cannot treat the new strain of silicon fever." Sujin looked at the request. The same species that had voted against human medical sharing agreements was now begging for help with a disease human doctors could cure easily. Response. "Template 7, she said quietly. The template was simple. "The Terran Medical Association appreciates your request but cannot provide assistance at this time. We recommend consulting with your local medical authorities." Was diplomatic language for solve your own problems. Engineer Boram Choi was designing atmospheric processors for the new human colonies when she received a desperate message from the Zalati settlements on Kepler 442b. Their processors were failing, and the colonies would become uninhabitable within weeks. She remembered the young Zalati families she had helped establish those colonies 20 years ago. Good people who had trusted their government to maintain the technology that kept them alive. For a moment, she almost reached for her communicator to offer help. Then she remembered the council session where the Zalati delegate had laughed at human technological paranoia and voted against the technology sharing proposal that would have trained alien engineers to maintain their own systems. She deleted the message without responding and returned to designing processors for human worlds. The Vorthak Empire, once the galaxy's dominant military power, was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. Without human peacekeeping forces to maintain order, every conquered species was rebelling simultaneously. Keltharis, the former council representative, now found himself governing an empire reduced to a handful of core worlds. His species' vaunted logic had led them into a trap of their own making. He sent daily messages to Earth, offering everything the Vorthak possessed in exchange for human military support. The messages went unanswered. Admiral Tae-Jin Cho, now commanding Earth's expanded defense fleet, occasionally read the alien military reports with professional interest. The various species were fighting wars with equipment they couldn't maintain, using tactics they didn't understand, supported by logistics networks that had already collapsed. "It's like watching children play with broken toys," he told his staff during a briefing. Some of his officers felt sorry for the aliens struggling with conflicts they couldn't resolve. Tae-Jin reminded them of the decades of human proposals for peaceful conflict resolution that the aliens had rejected as emotionally driven nonsense. The quantum relay network had failed completely 3 months ago. Most alien species were now reduced to slower-than-light communication, making large-scale coordination impossible. Governments couldn't communicate with their colonies. Military fleets couldn't coordinate with their high commands. Trade relationships dissolved when partners couldn't even talk to each other. Technical supervisor Daeho Shin, now working on Earth's independent communication network, watched the alien communication systems collapse with professional satisfaction. He had spent decades maintaining technology for people who called human engineering unnecessarily complex. Let them try to rebuild it themselves. In the ruins of the Galactic Council chambers, Speaker Mortak sat alone among empty seats. Most of the member species had withdrawn from the Council, unable to afford the membership fees without their human-supported economies. The few remaining delegates spent their time arguing about whose fault the collapse was, but they all knew the truth. They had taken humanity for granted, treated human generosity as weakness, and dismissed human warnings as emotional nonsense. Now they were learning what the galaxy looked like, without human civilization to hold it together. President Song received his final report of the day from Colonial Administrator Hyojin Moon, who was now overseeing the establishment of New Sol in the Proxima Centauri system. Sir, the colony is ahead of schedule. We'll have full habitation facilities operational within 6 months. No alien territorial disputes, no council regulations, no resource sharing agreements. It's exactly what human colonization should be. The president smiled. This was what humanity had always been capable of achieving. They had just needed to stop wasting their efforts on people who didn't appreciate them. As the earth turned toward night, Hyunwoo Kim walked through his garden one final time. The communicator remained silent. He had blocked all incoming alien channels days ago. Tomorrow he would start his new job as Earth's ambassador to the independent human colonies. For the first time in his career, he would be representing humanity's interests to other humans, people who shared human values and human hopes for the future. The galaxy had taught humanity a valuable lesson about the cost of unappreciated generosity. Humanity had learned that lesson well, and they would not forget it. The stars belonged to whoever was strong enough and wise enough to claim them, and humanity was both.